Echo and HarperAudio present A Sportsman's Notebook, Stories by Ivan Turgenev, performed by Steve Marvel. Introduction. A Sportsman's Notebook, the first of Turgenev's masterpieces, was written in several stages, mostly between 1846 and 1851, with two of the stories in this volume, The End of Chetopkinov and The Live Relic, added later for an edition of 1874. Most of the stories appeared first in the Russian literary magazine The Contemporary between 1847 and 1851 and were published together in 1852 to the anger of the authorities. These coincided with a happy time in Turgenev's relationship with the Spanish opera singer Pauline Viardot, especially those written in France in 1847 and 1848. Some of the inspiration for the book may have come from the infinitely more dreary Souvenirs de chasse, published by Pauline's French husband Louis in 1846. Louis Viardot, a theatrical producer and impresario, was also a keen sportsman. This perhaps contributed to the curious fact that Turgenev and he seem to have remained friends in spite of the novelist's love for his wife. Ivan Turgenev came from a landowning family in the Russian province of Orel. Born in 1818, he grew up on the family estate at Spasskaya in the care of his irascible and tyrannical mother, whose behavior led to his early disgust with serfdom. She appears in several of his stories, most notably Mumu, Punin and Baburin, and The Inn, a forbidding and Philistine figure who terrorized her serfs, quite different to a remote philandering husband who died in 1834 without apparently playing a great part in his son's life, except to suggest the romantic apartness of the distant parent in First Love. Turgenev attended schools in Moscow and universities in Moscow and St. Petersburg before leaving for Berlin. While he was away, his mother missed him dreadfully. Later, he worked briefly as a civil servant before resigning, much against his mother's will, to devote himself entirely to writing. He met and fell in love with Pauline Viardot during her visit to St. Petersburg in 1843. Turgenev followed her and her husband to Paris, and then to wherever she might be in Europe. In 1850, after his mother's death, he inherited Spasskaya. However, his infatuation with Pauline and the hostile reception given to fathers and children in Russia after its publication in 1862, particularly by radicals who thought it caricatured their beliefs, made him reluctant to visit his homeland for long. Like many novelists, Turgenev began as a poet. He was introduced to Pauline Viardot as a young Russian landowner, a good shot, an agreeable companion, and a writer of bad verses. These words imply a dilettantism of which Turgenev would be sometimes accused. Dostoevsky caricatured him as the precious and foolish Karamazov in The Devils. Tolstoy condemned his frivolity. Turgenev was not a novelist of belief. In time, he follows Pushkin and Lermontov, and early stories such as The Duelist, Three Portraits, and The Jew show the influence of their Byronic romanticism. He was also the heir to the more naturalistic Gogol, and his first true mentor was the liberal critic Belinsky, a Westerner as opposed to a Slavophile. The nearest Turgenev gets to mysticism is in his descriptions of human or natural phenomena, not in some evocation of an unearthly divinity. He has no religion in the sense that Tolstoy or Dostoevsky have. A Sportsman's Notebook has no backbone of plot or schematic narrative. The episodes are not stories, but glimpses of situations or characters, occasionally descriptions of scenery or landscape. For inspiration, Turgenev went back to his youth at Spasskaya, his mother's estate, where hunting expeditions had been a way of escaping briefly from her tyranny. His motive in writing about the countryside must have been at least partly political. The reactionary Tsar Nicholas I was still on the throne, and there seemed no prospect of reform. A landowner
Sample complete. Ready to continue?